UT's College of Rock. Streaming at WUTKRadio.com and on your TuneIn app.
Welcome into the Friday night edition of Rock Solid Sports. I'm your host, Tucker Harlan, alongside Jackson Metcalf. Jackson, this is your first ever show here at Rock Solid Sports. How does it feel?
Feels good, man. It feels good.
Yeah, it's the first time for everything. My first time being on a show with only one other person, too. This is absolutely wild, but we're going to make the most of it. We're going to make the most of it. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it here. Tennessee sports, they're happening now. The NCAA school year has kicked off officially. You had women's soccer yesterday, played all over the country, and some was played right here in our backyard here at Regal Soccer Stadium as the Lady Vols hosted the Cal Golden Bears. And this one ended up kind of being a blowout. 4-1 was the final score in this game. I noticed the first goal of the game was a rather interesting goal, I guess you could say. It looked like it was a bit of a handball maybe, but they end up with a 4-1 victory. So that's a good start to the season.
Over any Cali team, really, because, I mean, me and Benny talked about it earlier. It was being talked about all over the place, even at their, kids' game. It was just talked about. It was interrupted in the middle of it to just announce it.
Yeah, I know. It's just bizarre that, they got this big one. And they've had lots of injury issues, too. I know. So they've just, have been having these precautionary holdouts and whatnot. So, they get that big win over Cal. And they've got another game coming up against East Tennessee State next week. And, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a soccer expert by any means. That's just not my thing. But, I can't imagine East Tennessee State's very good, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I try to keep a little bit of a tab on at least.
Yeah, it's something that, Tennessee's been good at over the years. They had a good team not too long ago. I know last year there was a bit of a struggle last season. They just, had too many tough games out of the gauntlet, never really could recover.
Yeah.
But looking ahead, they've got SMU, Indiana on the schedule. Those are two schools that I think will be fairly difficult for them. They actually go to Florida Atlantic, which is a very fascinating one, having to play down there in that humidity. So, we'll see what they can do. It's going to be a fun year for this Lady Vols soccer team.
Should be very interesting indeed.
Yeah. All right. So, on that note, we need to flip over to another Tennessee team that has had some stuff going on lately. They haven't had any games played yet, but the Tennessee football team is nearing its end of fall camp, right? They've got they just got a couple more days. And of course, once school starts, that's when everything kind of slows down. So Tennessee fall camp was their last practice that is allowing the media into it. And let me grab my notes here. I took several today. You have a lot of guys that are banged up, and I feel like a broken record saying this, but there just gets to be a point in the season where nobody is healthy for the entirety of it, right? Guys are almost never 100%, and so what I've got today from practice, as far as injuries goes, I know Dylan Sampson has been a little dinged up all camp long. I know today we were supposed to hear from him post practice, but we didn't have a chance to hear from him simply because of that. Other guys out there that you might know, Jordan Thomas, Omar Norman Lott, Christian Charles, they were all held inside from the drills today that they do outside with their position groups. So I would just imagine all this stuff is precautionary. It's not like these guys are just not able to stand up on 2 feet.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of what we got going on there. And I did notice that Squirrel White was held out today. He didn't run routes. So he warmed up and everything. It's not like he's not healthy, but it's just all precautionary measures at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's going to be a big year for them too. I mean, after the expectations from last year and having a bunch of big games too. I mean, like they have to go to the Swamp for Florida. They have to
Yeah.
be at Alabama, Georgia. Well, yeah, that's at a home game. Nothing to overlook either.
Yeah, no,
So-
it's interesting with Florida because they've got that quarterback in Graham Mertz, who
Mhm.
I know how the history is with Tennessee in the Swamp. It's not good, right?
Exactly.
I was a year and a half old the last time that Tennessee won down there, so it's obviously not good.
Mhm. Yeah.
But what I think should help raise the confidence of Tennessee fans is, Graham Mertz was a guy that did not perform well at Wisconsin, right? He comes from a system where he's just had to hand the ball off to a good running back. And he's got two good running backs to do that with this year.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. But at Wisconsin, you've got a very, very good offensive line to run behind. You don't have that at Florida this year,
Yeah.
at least not this year. But you just to factor that in, and the fact that this dude, I know at least one season where he threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. Not something you ever want to see
No.
out of your quarterback. And, I know Anthony Richardson was a little indecisive at times, but from a pure athletic standpoint, Graham Mertz is not even half of what Anthony
Not at
Richardson
all.
is.
Richardson is a phenomenal athletic player.
Yeah.
He had some ups and downs last year, of course, but he was still looked at as just a pure raw talent. And with this guy, it's just not as much as Richardson was for the Gators.
Oh, not at all.
Mhm.
Not one bit. He puts the number 15 to shame if you're Tim Tebow, I feel like. So you have that. And it's on the note of quarterbacks, I did get to watch a good bit of their passes that they were throwing today on the routes, really all three of them. And we don't usually get to film that portion of practice. Josh Heupel usually will tell us not to film it. But today we got to film every bit of the routes that were being run. And I got to be honest, Joe Milton looked really, really good today. I don't actually recall any incompletions that he had. I know Nico had a couple. I know I think Chaz Nimrod had one drop, and I think something was messed up with Nimrod's finger too. He walked by me at one point, and his middle finger was all bloody, around the ring of it, which is a little odd. And I know Nico underthrew Caleb Webb today, but he was hitting guys. Joe was hitting guys in stride today. I know Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton in particular, got a lot of good catches in from Joe, and didn't see as much from Mel Keaton, but I do know that he had at least one catch today. So good looking stuff from those guys.
And Joe is a little bit, I guess you can kind of look at it from that perspective that Joe Milton's a little bit more comfortable in the volunteer kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Kind of Nico can kind of get into that a little bit more, I feel like.
Yeah.
He can kind of get in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Nico is definitely in a season where I don't know if I'd call it a redshirt year anymore, but he's got to learn a lot under Joe because he is the guy if Joe goes down for any reason, and just based on what I've seen in practice, there are portions of the Tennessee fan base that are calling for Nico Iamaleava to end up winning the starting job at some point. Based on what I've seen in practice, that should not be the case. I think Joe Milton is far superior to Nico right now. Obviously, that if Nico can prove himself like Joe did last year and mop up duty in some of those blowout wins, both earlier in the season and then you had a couple, at least with Mizzou later on in the year, that was really good. So, if Nico has those opportunities to really prove himself, then I do think that, if it's a random game where, you need him to start for some reason with Joe Milton going down, then I think you could rely on him if he proves himself in mop-up duty.
A very, as of this moment, he's very good in, short doses, I guess you could say. If something were to happen with Joe, or if, again, if there is inevitable blowouts, or if there is this problem with Joe Milton that happens, then Nico, I think, will be very good to carry the weight of that.
On the same note of the Tennessee offense, I did see today that Squirrel White was named to Bruce Feldman's freak list, which it's a very interesting list because it took into account the fastest, most explosive, and strongest players. And it's interesting with Squirrel because I think a big part of the reason why he's on that list is because his name's Squirrel. It's not often you meet a guy named Squirrel out there, but it's the fact that he is just so much faster than everybody else out there, and I think it's well deserved because Joe Milton. We talked in 2021, obviously, about Overthrow Joe, that guy. He doesn't, at least as of 2022, he doesn't exist that much with that moniker anymore, right? Because, with a guy like a Squirrel White out there who's, just got that speed that he has, then you're not overthrowing him. You can't overthrow a guy that fast.
Yeah, it's like just he's able to get to the ball or at least get his route done a lot quicker than most people.
Yeah.
And with that explosiveness and that speed, that's just really good to have.
Yeah, because you had quick guys in 2021, guys like he was bigger, but Cedric Tillman, Javante Payton was another dude that could run downfield really quickly. And Velus Jones, and of course, as of last year, Jalen Hyatt. But obviously, none of this is matched to what we are seeing out of Squirrel White.
No, not at all. He's just got this speed that's just something that you need to treasure, something that's like valuable.
Yeah. So one thing that I have heard a lot of about Tennessee and the scrimmage, which is interesting, is that the pass rush has been good in some of these scrimmages compared to what it has been. And I think that's an area where Tennessee really needs to develop this year. And I've been keeping my eye on this all camp long, is that, Tennessee's got tremendous potential on the edges, right? They've got a couple of guys, and, Tyler Barron is one that could really prove himself later on. And then you've got some younger dudes like your Josh Josephs, your James Pierces, who they've shown flashes at times, and they can be better here in the future. But what concerns me more than that is the development of guys inside, right? We know Omari Thomas is good. We know he can be an anchor for that team in the middle on that D line. But you get outside of Omari Thomas, you don't have a whole lot there.
Not a lot of depth to it.
No.
Outside of that.
No, not a lot. So, of course, you need to work on that spot a little bit more. But I do think that the linebacker position is a place where Tennessee is looking much better this year than it has in the past, right? Because you do lose Jeremy Banks, although I think with that you get Keenan Pili, and you basically trade a bit of a volatile character to some degree and Jeremy Banks. I mean, obviously there was at least speculated, what happened with the South Carolina game, but also, going before that, there was other stuff off the field too. But you get a guy in Keenan Pili, and, when I've been around Keenan Pili in some of the availabilities that we've had in fall camp, doesn't seem like a guy that would have that kind of character to him. And he's a 25-year-old man. He's married, and, he's a much different guy, and he's going to be a great compliment to Aaron Beasley in this linebacking core, I believe. So you get him, and you got a freshman in Arian Carter out of Smyrna, Tennessee, which, I've heard weird stuff about him being maybe the next Al Wilson. That's a bit of a hot take this far in advance. You would hope for his sake that would be the case.
Another thing, like going off of last year, that kind of concerns me going into this one, I guess, would be like the secondary, because even when we were beating teams pretty badly, there would always be those times when a corner or a safety, say, it was a blown coverage and the wide receiver gets open wide. I think one of the biggest examples I could think of at the top of my head is, of course, the South Carolina game, when it was like, sure, the offense was able to score for a while, like, of course, before Hooker went down, but the secondary wasn't able to stop them from making big passes. Like, Spencer was able to throw downfield and kind of like his man would be open, and the secondary wouldn't really, or the corner or safety wouldn't really be there for it. So I feel like that's something that I feel like needs to kind of be a little bit more developed. And I feel like that will be the case this year.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. And, it's interesting because they bring back a lot of those same guys that you had last year, right? You got Tamari McDonald back. Wesley Walker is officially going to go into a bit more of a permanent role there as a starter. You got those guys in. You got Kamal Hadden, Jalen McCullough back again, Warren Burrell back after a year-long hiatus, essentially. So but it's weird with that group of guys though, right? Because while they're experienced, we've seen the flaws in this Tennessee secondary, right? Because you have games where Tennessee suddenly looks amazing, like they did against Kentucky last season here at Neyland Stadium. Yeah. But then you see the disasters that were the Florida and South Carolina game for the secondary, and you just don't know what to make of it. So I think a lot of people within the Tennessee fan base would like to see some new blood in there. And, I think they have a good point. I think they do. But this year, I think you got to let those younger guys develop and just hope that you don't need those guys at any point in the season.
Yeah, you kind of hope that they won't have to come up. And yeah, you brought up the Kentucky game. That was I would say a phenomenal game for the secondary. They did great, 3 interceptions, I believe.
Yeah. The week after they gave up 300+ yards to UT Martin.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that too.
They made Will Levis look like a real NFL star, didn't they?
I know, and now he's with the Titans. As a matter of fact.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that later.
But yeah, and then they have thankfully during Florida, it almost was a collapse, but thankfully they actually were able to get their heads together, I guess, and able to pull off a game-sealing interception at the end. Yeah,
and that's the weird thing about this defense, Jackson, because they're so unreliable at times. But last year, it was like they would force a turnover once or twice a game, and that would somehow end up giving Tennessee the win at the end. It's just you watch this defense all game long. You hate it for the most part, but then it makes a couple plays, which, if they don't make those plays, they probably don't win the game. They make those, force those weird turnovers here and there. Those just oddball turnovers.
That was the game at Pitt actually comes to mind, I believe.
Yes.
It had a fumble that actually.
Amari Thomas had a fumble recovery. Trayvon Flowers had a pick earlier in the game. Very bizarre. A lot of weird things had to go right in that Pitt game for really the whole 2022 season to play out the way in which it did.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and say the secondary is all bad, of course, like we mentioned. And of course, I think the defense as a whole is pretty solid too. I adore the front line and I adore the linebacking as well. It's just, I feel like the secondary was something at the end of the year, kind of when everything was said and done. I feel like that's something we need to primarily focus on. Yeah,
absolutely. Need to focus on the secondary. And then I guess the one thing that we haven't hit on as much so far is the offensive line, which I've heard, there are members of this fan base that are disappointed in what they're hearing out of training camp. I wouldn't be overly concerned about it the way it is right now, because you've got a good transfer coming in, and John Campbell. Andre Carrick is a dude to keep a name to keep an eye on, rather. Stumbling on my words there. The Cooper Mays thing is interesting, though. I mean, he's out with an injury here pretty much until kickoff. So right now, the real anchor up front that you got there is Javonte Spraggins.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that Cooper Mays would, I'm sure that injury would still kind of be aggravating him as well for the first week of the season. So I'm sure that they either wouldn't really want to start him just yet to give him a little bit more time to recuperate and all that, or see if they can go ahead and start him. It just, I feel like, depends entirely on the scenario.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Well, with that, we got to take our first break of the hour. But on the other side, we're going to talk some NFL. We got some preseason stuff going on. A couple big, announcements today out of the NFL as well. So we'll have all that and more for you on the other side right here on Rock Solid Sports. You're listening to Volunteer Radio 90.3 The Rock, UT's College of Rock.
The Rock thanks the One Knox Sporting Club soccer team for their support. One Knox plays all of their home matches.
I feel like I do terrible all the time.
Campus, runs into October, with matches against Memphis, Chattanooga, Lexington, and more USL League One.
I feel like if I can pull up the Newsweek article I don't think it was Newsweek. It was Washington Examiner that brought up that Commander story I was talking about.
No, you're helping me carry right now. You're the only person I have to talk to on this show.
Here it is. Yeah.
Volunteer Radio
petition to change back to the Redskins, which is over 100,000 signatures, and it was petition started June 21st, and it reached 105, and it's one of the most signed petitions on the website it was put on.
Link up.
Only being followed by, like,
WTKRadio.com.
some kind of political stuff, which I don't think we'd want to get into.
Yeah.
I feel like I wouldn't want to get. I'll just say like I could just simply say like, oh, it's just out of like a lot of the stuff. It's one of the highest of change.org.
90.3.
Yeah, I gotta read this thing.
The athletic department.
That's me, dude. I sound like a
2023
sweet
football
turd.
balls
I'm
are
like
playing
an
home
idiot.
games at Neyland Stadium against SEC rivals South
I
Carolina,
gotta say, there's
Georgia.
a person I was
Texas A&M,
listening
and
to
others.
before.
Allballs.com.
I was listening to him last year yesterday because I was supposed to come in, but he had already voiced that.
Yeah.
And he just slurs over his words a little
That's
bit.
very weird.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta go in here.
All right.
Go Balls.
The Rock thanks the UT Athletics Department and the Lady Vols soccer program for their support. The 2023 Lady Vols soccer team will face off on the pitch against rival East Tennessee State University this Thursday, August 24th at 7 p.m. at the Regal Soccer Complex off of Neyland Drive. And the public is invited to attend and cheer the Lady Vols on against East Tennessee State. Stay tuned for Rock Solid Sports updates on the UT Lady Vols soccer. UTsports.com, and a link is at WUTKRadio.com. The Rock says, good luck, Lady Vols soccer.
The Rock thanks Fieldhouse Social, Wednesday Help for Rock Solid Sports for their support.
I stumbled through that bad. I thought I
Oh,
saw,
I mean, it was only one.
I thought I saw some I didn't.
At least it live, I feel like it's a little bit more justifiable unless it's like a voice track. I feel like if you're,
Grilled Pharaoh.
Oh, if you voice track and you screw up, then you're an idiot.
yeah,
I'm
kind
sorry.
of like,
Hey, this is all you
There-
need to
well,
do.
so I think
You're
once I was
listening
like,
to
screw it, I
WUTK
kinda just wanna go home.
90.3
and I think,
FM,
oh no, I don't think it was anything bad. I just like sat there and went like I stopped for like a split second to make sure what I was saying was correct. And it's like, oh yeah, no, that's good. And then I just say it again anyway.
My morning jacket.
No, the guy yesterday, and the thing that concerned me was the concert calendar, and he was like, this time concert calendar is. It's like, please, dude, no, I can't barely understand what you're saying.
Oh, the worst is the damn morning show guy, Clay. He's up from 7 to 8 a.m. He's so awful. You tune into him?
Yeah, but yeah, now I want to. I want to get up at like 6 in the morning and like
Oh, it's-
tune into 7 just to hear it.
Oh, when I get here in the morning, he's like, I'm gonna say bye! And I'm like,
I had to do like a early in the morning one time because I think Benny had me. Well, it was pre-recorded anyway because I'm not gonna be here at like 5 in the morning or something. I think it's like actually I think it was like 7 or something, like, that. Like 7, 6, like that. Because I was like, good morning, and I didn't know what I was like planning because he also said like
90.3 The Rock.
it's like you don't have to do like liners. You don't have to do anything like anything fancy. It's just like announcing and forward announcing songs and stuff like that.
wait a minute. Why on earth is this not playing twice?
I don't want to hear myself twice.
You're gonna have to hear yourself again right here.
Why do I have to hear myself all the time? There was another one though. I think it was Benny's talking about it.
I hardly ever get on spots.
I don't even know why Benny wanted me to do it. I hate hearing my voice.
I hate it too.
Everyone's like listening to me, like my mom and dad. Everyone's like, "Oh, you sound so great." It's like, no, I don't. I sound like a prick.
I sound the same way, or I feel the same way. I don't sound the same way.
Like I try to be A casual, but also C, like, or A casual, but B also like keep myself composed and stuff like that.
Welcome back to the Friday night edition of Rock Solid Sports. I am your host, Tucker Harlan, alongside Jackson Metcalf. Jackson's killing it on his first show right now. He really is.
I feel like I'm not, but I mean, whatever you say, and I'm sure everyone else is saying, "Oh, he's doing great."
Oh, yeah. He's awesome right now.
Yeah, we talked about it like during the break. It's everyone's like telling me, "Oh, you're doing great,"
Yeah.
and there's that voice in the back of my head saying, "No, you're not.
No,
You're
dude,
not doing good."
You're keeping us on the air right now. Let me tell you. All right.
Oh, go on.
All right. We got to jump into some NFL talk here. Preseason has ramped up already. They've got 1 week underneath their belt. They've actually gotten the second week going as of last night. But there's been a couple pretty big NFL-related headlines today. First of all, Washington has named a man as their starting quarterback. Sam Howell, North Carolina Tar Heel himself, is going to be the starter week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals. And this is a guy that they brought in, and I felt like was just a highly touted player, really just among all the NFL scouts when he got to the league, first of all. But he got stuck behind Carson Wentz. So, of course, that sucked for him. If you're Washington, I think you would really hope that this is the guy, because I think Washington is a franchise that if they have the right dude running the field at quarterback, then you know what? They're probably a playoff team.
Exactly. But, I mean, the team has kind of gone through a lot. I mean, their owner sold not too long ago. Of course, last year I don't recall, but I don't think it was as successful as anyone had wanted it to be.
Well, no, Commanders. Definitely not, because you had the other 3 teams in the NFC East go to the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. You had your Eagles, of course, made it into the Super Bowl. And then, of course, the Cowboys get to the divisional round. You know, of course, Zeke got blown up there at the end by whoever that was on the 49ers. But, you know, the Giants made it to the divisional round as well.
Yeah, so the Giants were a surprise.
Yeah, very surprising team last year.
And, yeah, because it also falls on Carson Wentz. Just kind of hasn't returned to that form we've seen back during their 2017 Eagles Super Bowl run.
And to be honest with you, he was never really that good over there. Nick Foles won the thing for him. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he was just so good over there either. But, you know, back to what I was originally saying, I just think that team has got so much. I mean, we've seen what the defense can do, right, with Washington. And, I don't love the by committee approach at running back. I know we talked a little bit about that on Monday, just with some of the guys that have signed on Monday to other places, Zeke and Dalvin in particular. They've got that over there at Washington as well with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson at the moment. But both of those guys are respectable NFL running backs, in my opinion. And you've got really 3 good receivers, in Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and a young guy in Jahan Dotson that I think is probably one of the best receiver 3s in the league.
Yeah, I do think that it'll be interesting to see this team play. I mean, I hope that Howell does great, of course. I mean, he's got a lot there for him. Of course, you mentioned a deadly wide receiver trio. Yeah, he's got a solid defense with him as well. And I'm sure, I don't recall, but I think the offensive line was actually pretty solid as well. So it'll be interesting to see this team and during the season and all that.
Yeah, I just think you'd have to have a better decision maker at quarterback. You'd hope Sam Howell is that for this team. He's got his old buddy De'Ami Brown in that system as well from North Carolina too. So you'd hope that, with that, and then of course all the pieces around him, that the places are there to succeed. And I don't think this has anything to do with Ron Rivera. He's been praying for a good quarterback for a while up there in Washington. I mean, he even said it last year. Like, they just need a guy that's a more permanent staple of quarterback, just alluding to the fact that he knew Carson Wentz wasn't going to be the guy. And we've known he hasn't been the guy, since his time in Philly, could never finish over there. Yeah. And then in Indy, just a debacle at the end of the season. That loss to the Jags, where all the Jags fans were dressed up in clown costumes down there. They were ready to call it quits, the Jags were, and suddenly they go out there and win by 15. Yeah, Wentz has never been the guy.
But because I mean, a part of me does feel for him a little bit, because again, he was supposed to kind of be the guy in Philly. And yeah, it worked for the first. Well, it didn't work for the first season, but then the next season, that was the Super Bowl. Gets injured, replaced with Nick Foles. He wins the Super Bowl for him. They try to run with Wentz for the next few seasons. Doesn't work. Goes to Philly, or no, not Philly. Indy. Doesn't work there. It then goes over here to the Commanders and doesn't work there either.
No. So you got to have a guy that's more permanent. Again, we've been saying it. Sam Howell was a guy that was looked at by NFL scouts as one that could be the next guy, and maybe he is. We'll just have to see. One other big headline today out of the NFL that I do want to head on: Jadeveon Clowney signed with the Ravens today, and I think this guy has officially solidified himself as an NFL journeyman.
The next big journeyman of the NFL. Because Texans. He was on the Texans.
Seahawks.
The
Titans for the season where he didn't even sack anybody.
Yeah. And
the Browns, where he's been, I guess, the last year or two.
Yeah, for about, I'd say, a year or so. And now he's on the Ravens.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is kind of a bummer because I kind of liked Jadeveon Clowney.
I think it's pretty funny that he and Odell Beckham are now on the same team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Interesting indeed.
I just don't think Jadeveon Clowney was ever the guy that people knew he could be when he got to the NFL. If that makes sense, because I remember watching him back circa 2012 with South Carolina, right? He was amazing on South Carolina. Absolutely amazing. But then the next year in 2013, just things got weird. Like I remember that watching at least the first part of that opening game against North Carolina because I remember going to another very good college football game that night. But they watched that. I watched the first part of that game. Didn't see much I liked out of Clowney. It really was like that all season. When South Carolina came here to Tennessee to play that year, of course they lost to a 5-win Tennessee team that year, which is just bizarre considering they won 11. But he wasn't what he was cracked up to be that year either. Yet he still goes number 1 overall in the NFL draft the following season to the Texans, and just really spent all his time there, overshadowed by J.J. Watt.
Yeah. He wasn't clearly the same after that 1 year.
No.
And again, I guess the Texans thought maybe there's something we can get in this. Maybe there's some of that talent we could kind of get out of this. Maybe he'll turn back to his older ways, or maybe it was just kind of a risky pick, I feel like.
Yeah.
Back then.
I was talking with somebody else about this today, but the old ESPN analyst and former NFL player Merrill Hodge basically nailed this prediction that Clowney would not be what he was cracked up to be. Same thing with Johnny Football, which is just bizarre to think about, but he nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
It's just a shame because I wanted him to be good because I liked him. I liked what I saw out of him, and I just wish that he had kept that kind of caliber, I guess.
Yeah. So that's all of the major announcements today throughout the NFL. Of course, preseason is still going on right now. There's a couple teams we care about that are playing or have played already. The Browns and Eagles, first of all, they tied last night at 18, which is something I can't ever recall seeing in the preseason. But that's what ended up happening last night. And Cedric Tillman, VFL, 2 catches for 50 yards in that game. He's had a couple pretty good preseason games now. And, I really think this is a guy that could make his way up through that Browns receiving core.
Because again, Cedric Tillman, he was great. And to see that develop, because of course you'd have Deshaun Watson throwing him the ball. Because, also Watson is a dual threat. So to see him throw it at any time to Tillman would be great to see.
Well, Watson is one that I need to see more of on the field with the Browns, right? Because he's, of course, been away from football for a long time. And then, of course, he came back in week 13 last year, ironically, against the Texans. But we know what Watson can do. But a year plus some off the field, there's going to be some rust there.
Yeah. Me and my friends, we talked about that the other day, or at least the day the Browns got him. We said he's been away. He was, I believe, before the allegations and all that even came out, I believe he was just sitting out.
Yeah.
And then that happened. He was gone for about a year.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the suspension on top of all of that.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of just having to dust off everything. He's not going to be as good as he was before. And on top of that, he also, first year with the Texans, he also had that injury. So I'm sure that it wasn't going to be, he's not going to be at that high caliber just yet.
I'm not sure how much that injury will affect him, obviously, because that was years ago now. But I back to my original point, I think Cedric Tillman is in a very good position where he is right now because you've got an older Amari Cooper. I'm not saying that he's lost his touch or anything, but he's in year 10 in the league, which that makes me feel old. I saw that Drake Kirkpatrick's son committed to Alabama today. I remember watching Drake Kirkpatrick in 2011. I am so old.
Yeah.
But what I was saying is that you got Amari Cooper who's getting older, right? And then you've also got a couple guys in like Jakeem Grant and Marquise Goodwin who are like speedy guys you can use in your return game, but aren't necessarily used to catch the ball.
Yeah.
And then you've got Donovan Peoples-Jones, who I think Cedric Tillman is far more talented than and can easily overtake in a receiver room.
Yeah, I just think that Tillman will have a pretty fruitful NFL career.
Yeah, we'll see.
And of course, you mentioned Amari Cooper because 10 years. Yeah, I mean he could still do stuff, but I mean. It's a pretty active position he's at too, at wide receiver. So I don't know, 10 years that could turn into 12 and then he's out of the league. So who knows? I think Tillman would have to carry that mantle after him.
Yeah. Another name from that game that a lot of people here in Tennessee know, Marcus Mariota was 9 of 17 for 86 yards and a pick last night. So maybe not his best stuff. Of course, I don't think the Eagles are really going to expect him to play a whole lot. But that's what we got on that game. Right now, Jackson, I understand you're a Panthers fan, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so your Panthers are playing the Giants right now. They trail 7-0 here at the beginning of the game. Bryce Young, 2 of 4 for 22 yards at the moment. Adam Thielen did have a catch early on in this one. Jonathan Mingo, Ole Miss product, had a 15-yard catch as well. On the other side, man, why does Jalen Hyatt keep getting these negative receptions? He had one catch for -4 yards last week. He's got a catch for -3 this week. But everything that we've seen out of Jalen Hyatt would suggest that he's going to be the next man, big time receiver in this receiver room for the Giants here in years to come. I mean, he's putting on a new highlight every single day at this rate.
Yeah, he's just going to be their next OBJ, I'd assume. Okay, maybe that's a little.
Yeah, be careful with that one.
Yeah, I feel like that one's a little bit of too much.
Maybe be like a Mario Manningham or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Somebody without character problems.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. I meant talent-wise, OBJ, but not character-wise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So you've got Jalen Hyatt out there playing today. Looking through the rest of this team. Oh, here's one that a lot of Tennessee fans will know, Eric Gray. He had a 2-yard carry early on in the game. Not a guy that I think really would have fit the Heupel scheme, if I'm going to be completely honest. And I'm not saying that because he transferred out and I'm trying to disparage his name or anything. I'm just saying you got to be able to catch the ball a little bit more in this system. And I don't think he was able to do that quite as effectively as some of the guys on this current roster are. So that's what we've got with that game right now. And the Bengals and the Falcons are playing each other as well tonight. So I don't really know what to look for in that game. I think, Joe Burrow, of course, is sidelined and whatnot. So I'm not going to do any kind of predictions for preseason games. That's just not anything we need to do. The team that everybody cares about in the state of Tennessee, or most people care about, at least in the mid-state, the Titans are playing the Vikings tomorrow up there in Minnesota. They're actually a 2.5-point favorite in the preseason game. I didn't even know they had odds for preseason games, but yep, that's what we got there. And it's been a bit of a rough week for the Titans because Treylon Burks goes down with an injury. Everybody's freaking out. It's an LCL sprain, which is not what you hope for, but it could have been a lot worse. It really could have been a lot worse. So you have that. Will Levis also apparently sustained some kind of injury as well. I don't know in particular the details about all that stuff, but, it's not something you want to see. But if he's held out for at least an extended period of time, I guess we're just going to see Malik Willis the rest of the preseason.
And maybe this was another team. I think it was with the 49ers with Trey Lance, where they kind of were stacking the cards against him almost. But yeah, seeing Malik Willis would be interesting as well.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of faith in Malik Willis's ability right now if something were to happen to Ryan Tannehill, just because what we saw in that preseason game, and look, I understand it's preseason, right? We can't make too many judgments, but the issue I have with Malik Willis is that the decision-making just has not really appeared to improve from what it was last season. And I think that's just a really, really serious concern there. And, this Titans offensive line just does not seem to get any better because you had Nicholas Petit-Frere suspended, right? And then you've got the undersized Aaron Brewer who was out here playing, just fighting for his life. I think he'll do better at center now because that's kind of where more of the undersized guys end up. But you have those guys there. You got Peter Skoronski out there who, you hope ends up being the guy that you thought he was cut out to be in the draft. And I guess you just got to figure out the rest of the stuff because anything's better than Dennis Daly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Anything is better than Dennis Daly. You have to try really, really, really hard to be worse than what Dennis Daly was last season for the Tennessee Titans.
You'd have to go out of your way. Like, you'd have to try to do that.
Yeah, I just have to move over to my left a little bit and let Micah Parsons in there and just have a day. Have a nice 8-sack day, Micah.
To be worse, you'd have, just stand up, not even be on the field. Just let them go. And I feel like with a bad offensive line, that would absolutely I think this would apply to Will Levis too. That would absolutely kill their confidence. Because, we're gonna have another Tim Couch situation on our hands where great quarterback that we're hoping would be the person that would take them places, and their offensive line just doesn't do anything for them, and there goes your quarterback. Either he gets injured, his confidence is just shot because he's terrified that when he gets the ball, it's just going to be a turnstile. Yeah. Just for the defenders to get to him. So I just hope that doesn't happen to both Willis or Levis.
Yeah, the funny thing is I don't even think the offensive line is the biggest problem anymore, and certainly not the receiving core. D-Hop single-handedly solved that problem.
Really.
Single-handedly solved that problem. Now, obviously, there's no depth to it past that right now, especially with the Treylon injury. But, I think Chigga is going to be something special here. He's like a big wide receiver on this team. But I think the most pressing issue out of anything is the dang kicking situation. Tennessee has not had a good kicker since Ryan Suckup. That was probably middle of 2019 before he got injured. They bring in, I guess, was it Greg Joseph for the playoffs? Didn't do anything well for them. They think they're going to get something good out of Steven Gostkowski. Just completely horrendous performance in Denver on a Monday night. They get rid of him. They had Sam Sloman, the dude that doinked in the field goal attempt to get the win over the Texans in 2020 and give them the division title. Then it was Fat Randy season the last 2 years, and Fat Randy just never could provide. If he makes that field goal to beat the Giants in 2022, maybe it's a better end of the season. But no, not the case at all. And now it's a battle between Caleb Shudak and Trey Wolf. From what I've heard, Trey Wolf is maybe a little bit better right now than Caleb Shudak has been in training camp. But overall, that does not do anything to hide the fact that this is a complete dumpster fire.
Just take a shot every time the Titans miss a game winner.
That's exactly what's going on.
Go on.
No, you go.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to end that statement. Just take a shot every time the Titans kicker misses a field goal to either win the game or just in general, like an extra point or a field goal to win it, and he just muffs it or doinks it off the uprights. It would just, I feel like that's going to happen a lot more.
The way the Titans play is, or at least right now or last season, before, of course, you got rid of the evil monster that was Todd Downing, was you handed the ball off to Derrick Henry. You hope maybe you score 17 points in the game. You hope your defense does its job. But if you get down and you have a chance to win the game late, you need a field goal kicker to win you the game. The Titans have not had that. And the way they've been playing lately, you need a field goal kicker to win you some games.
They just take out Derrick Henry. He'll be your kicker too.
Yeah, or be like that Eric Reed guy on the Chiefs who kicked some field goals last year for him while Butker was out. He was actually good.
Yeah.
He moved over from safety. He did a good job. He did a really good job. So, I will probably be far more upset with the Titans come 3 weeks from now when they're playing the Saints. It just feels like, with the Saints too, because they do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And they won't have Alvin Kamara. So it just feels like we're anticipating a 13-10 low-scoring affair. If you got fantasy players in that game, bless your poor heart. They're not
going to be.
They're not going to do well. They're not going to do anything because the defenses will prevail in that game. It's going to be the worst thing to have to sit through.
It's going to be a snore bowl is what it's going to be.
I should not be sitting through this on my Sundays, but you know what? I willingly
You'll
do
have
it
to do it
every Sunday. I just have to sit through it, and
You'll just
it's a fact of life at this point.
Is it a primetime game? Is it in the 1
No,
o'clock? or is it the 4 o'clock?
it's your 1 o'clock slot.
Okay.
The Titans will never play in the 4 o'clock slot unless they're out there on the West Coast. And
Yeah.
but I can remember the years where the Titans would just never play any kind of primetime games, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
outside of their one annual garbage game against the Jaguars every year,
yeah.
there for a little bit
Yeah.
on the Thursday night, they would
When-
never get on Sundays. They would never get on Mondays.
When
What would happen is you'd have the 2-14 Titans with Zach Mettenberger starting at quarterback. I did actually go to the Zach Mettenberger game, by the way, in 2014 when it happened. It was
Oh.
terrible, absolutely terrible to watch that happen out there. But, yeah, the Titans just not a team that I think we're going to see play some pretty-looking football this year.
Seems like the AFC South is just wide open for the Jags, I feel like.
Yeah, the Jags definitely have the most potential moving forward just because they're a little bit more established at the quarterback position than everybody else.
Yeah.
You look at the rest of the division, I mean, only time is going to tell with C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson.
Oh,
Again, no judgments to make on preseason. We all thought Jamar Chase was going to be absolutely terrible in the preseason,
Fair point.
and suddenly he's like borderline, if not the best
One of the
receiver
top wide receivers. Yeah.
in the NFL. So, yeah, you've got a very open division for the Jaguars, and it doesn't look like outside of the Titans, there's going to be any good competition for them this year.
And like you just said, like take the preseason with a grain of salt because, I mean, yeah, as we mentioned before, Jamar Chase, he wasn't seen as when he was drafted, everyone thought this was a bust before it even happened.
Yeah.
And it was looking like that early on in the preseason, but then come the regular season, he's a fundamental piece to their Super Bowl run. I believe it. Yeah, they made the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah, they made it to the Super Bowl just because they got him in there with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd in that rotation. So it was good for them to get that piece.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we got to take our last break of the hour. Coming up, we'll talk a little bit of college football here on the other side. So keep it tuned right here to Volunteer Radio 90.3, The Rock, QT's College of Rock.
90.3 The Rock of the Hill.
The Rock thanks the One Knox Sporting Club soccer team for their support.
All right.
All their home matches at Regal Soccer Stadium on campus, and the season runs until
Just a little bit of
October.
water here.
Matches against Memphis, Chattanooga, Lexington, and more USL League One opponents. Tickets, including UT student tickets and game day info, is at oneknoxsc.com. WTK is proud to be a media partner with One Knox. Rock Solid Sports will be keeping up with One Knox Soccer all season long. One Knox SC. We are one.
That was just.
Volunteer Radio receives support from Tennessee Smokies Baseball, the AA Southern League affiliate of the Chicago Cubs, whose 2023 regular season schedule features 6-game homestands Tuesdays through Sundays at Smoky Stadium in Kodak. It's a 9-inning vacation. The next series takes place right now, actually, between the Rocket City Trash Pandas and the Smokies. That is between August 15th through Sunday, August 20th. WUTK's Rock Solid Sports will keep you up to date with Smokies Baseball Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m. TheSmokiesBaseball.com, and a link is at WUTKRadio.com.
thanks to Knoxville Ice Bears Southern Professional Hockey League.
I don't know why I just did that.
Ice
Their
Bears.
2023-24 home ice season from October.
All right,
through
I gotta
April
find some random
includes
college
games
football stuff to
in
talk
Fayetteville,
about.
Oh gosh.
Huntsville,
Well, I mean,
Roanoke,
in all fairness, let's see. We go in after Soulja Boy.
Single game and season tickets.
Right.
at
Yeah.
Okay.
knoxvilleicefairs.com.
Let's see.
Fox
Now,
Sports
that's
features
2
Ice
minutes
Bears
right there.
Wednesdays
It's
with
No, we
currently-
don't go in after Soldier Boy. We go in after next episode. We fade out with Soldier Boy.
Oh, okay, never mind then. That'd be. Is it me?
Hello.
No,
This
yes,
is
thank
Del
you.
Bryant, son of
Actually, I think I'm
Nico
next,
Rich
actually.
Grant, the authors of
It's,
Rocky
in all fairness, 10. I feel like we can.
into Volunteer Radio
Take something for a while.
90.3 The Rock.
Because I mean, in all fairness, that NFL one
Yeah.
went on for a while, so. Falcons rookie RB. Not first carry is electric, apparently. Thank you, Daily Snark.
2023
That's me
football
there.
Balls will play home games at Neyland
Let's see,
Stadium against
what did he
SEC
do?
rivals, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas A&M, and others. Allballs.com for info. With a link at WUTKRadio.com. UT student ticket info is at bigorangetix.utk.edu. 90.3 The Rock says, Go Balls.
What else has happened as of recent?
Volunteer Radio is supported by
All right.
Social.
I found a random poll.
Hosts the Wednesday night Rock Solid Sports
Oh,
broadcast.
oh. Oh yeah, is that the? Is that just a random? It's about the AP.
Top 25's greatest programs ever, according to the AP.
Oh, I just saw Texas on there somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Netflix releasing 4-part untold documentaries on Urban Meyer era in Florida. That's kind of cool.
That's gonna come out in like a day or two.
I mean, you look at that team; it was great, but look at them now.
Yeah.
Aaron Hernandez, except for Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer is had basically his career burned apart now because of his stint with the Jags.
Go
Yep.
Balls basketball.
Volunteer Radio receives
That
support
actually
from
should.
Tennessee
Is there?
Sports Baseball.
Was that Aaron Hernandez documentary? That was Netflix,
Chicago
right?
Cubs, whose 2023 regular season schedule
I don't remember.
features 6
There
game
was a
homestands
documentary
Tuesdays
that
through
was
Sundays
Aaron
nearby
Hernandez
Cardinal
that
Stadium.
came out like a year or
Against the
two ago, I
Chattanooga
think.
Lookouts, Mississippi Braves,
But-
Birmingham Barons,
I
and
don't
more.
know where it was on.
WUTK's Rock Solid Sports covers Smokies baseball all season long. SmokiesBaseball.com.
Yeah, we
Link up
got
at WUTKRadio.com.
7-ish minutes, I think.
Hi, this is
Oh,
Jared
we can make it
from
work.
The Funhouse.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that'll definitely work.
Our show and the things that we
What are you
do
doing,
can be
brother?
seen as childish, not funny, sophomore, vapid, stupid.
Yeah, I don't take the preseason seriously. Me after their
We
first
strive to bring
game
you
with
the
Fantasy.
radio
Team's gonna be
that
shit.
people love
Yeah.
every week. So won't you please
I don't give them enough leeway as I should. I feel like I should, but I just crap on them constantly. I'm a very, very, very pessimistic.
Since 2013.
Stop by the Funhouse Friday nights from 8 till 10, only on 90.3 The Rock.
The Funhouse is proudly sponsored by Raven Records and Rarities and Happy Holler, providing Knoxville vinyl and more for nearly 40 years. And by ScruffyCity.com, your downtown destination.
Welcome back for one final time to the Friday night edition of Rock Solid Sports. Once again, I'm Tucker Harlan alongside Jackson Metcalf. Jackson's been a good night. We had a lot of good NFL discussions last segment.
It was very
Now-
interesting.
Yeah, now we're going to get into a little poll here. You know I love polls. It gets the people talking. Love to get the people talking. All right. So this is the AP Top 25's greatest programs ever. Tennessee is on this list. They are at number 10, which I think is a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Yeah, because at 1, you've got Alabama. At 2, you've got Ohio State. 3, Oklahoma. 4, Michigan. 5, Notre Dame. 6 is USC. There's a tie at 7, actually, between Texas and Nebraska. And then you got Penn State at 9, which, you know, I think it's not awful to take a backseat to those programs. But
Yeah.
one thing that I do think is interesting, though, is you've got Georgia down there at 12, and Florida is all the way down at 15. That might upset some of those fans that Tennessee's
Yeah.
ahead of them.
I think that actually would, yeah. 'Cause-
Yeah.
And of course, like Georgia, that's
Yeah.
also shocking.
Well, there's
Well-
recency bias involved if you were to do stuff or to, calculate the poll based on that, right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, there was a 40-plus year drought there for Georgia in national
Very
titles.
dark period
Yeah,
for Georgia.
they were always, near the top. They were never at the top.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it, because you had basically Mark Richt 10-3 mediocrity, basically, where you get to double-digit wins, maybe a conference championship in there. You would never win the conference championship. You'd just be kind of sitting there. You wouldn't never really do anything. That was kind of the definition of Georgia there for a while, so that's why they're right there. And, Florida, again, it's more of recency bias if you were to put them higher up in the poll, right? Because you've got probably, success over the last 35-ish years now. But you go before, say, the 1970s, it's not really there, and that's why Tennessee can capitalize on it, because they had success under General Robert Neyland. He was really one of the first great coaches in the SEC.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to kind of look at that because also I believe LSU is in between.
LSU's at 11, and I've been accused of being an LSU fan on this show before. I got to say that's absolutely not true to any of our fellow members of Rock Solid Sports that are listening. I'm not an LSU fan, but I do think LSU very much deserves a spot in the top 10, should be rated very highly. What do you think about LSU, Jackson?
Well, seeing as how I've had a friend of mine be an LSU fan for basically his entire life, he wasn't insufferable. He wasn't.
Yeah.
But I do have a soft spot for LSU. I do think that they are a really good franchise. I'm talking as if it's the NFL.
A
very good football team. A very good just sports all around.
Yeah.
It's just, because, there was a time for a little bit right there where they were just kind of okay. They weren't, and of course, they had their amazing year in 2019, and they had an amazing year beforehand. They've had consistently a lot of pretty solid teams overall.
Yeah. But I have these haters out here that just don't see the LSU hype, but they can't prove themselves. Maybe they'd be on here right now if they wanted to prove themselves, but they're not here. So guess what, guys? LSU, outside of the Florida State and Alabama game, I don't see a way they lose to any of these other teams. It takes an exceptional Ole Miss team to beat them. We all know Death Valley is a very hard place to win.
Mm-hmm.
And the teams that are coming to Death Valley this year just simply aren't cut to do the job. Texas A&M's never won there since they've been in the SEC. Auburn had a prolonged drought in Death Valley. They didn't win a game between 1999 and 2021 down there. So pretty crazy how that works. And, Florida's on a pretty bad losing streak to them right now as well. I think they're up to 4 or 5 losses in a row. And then blanking here, Arkansas, they kind of went sparingly against LSU. They don't do it that often. So, again, I just do not have any good reasons why LSU should be any worse than 10-2 or maybe even 9-3.
Yeah, and I think LSU will be pretty good this season.
All right, that is going to do it for us tonight right here on Rock Solid Sports. Thank you, Jackson, so much. You made my life a lot easier. Great first show for you, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I look forward to doing this more and more.
Yeah, you should. It's going to be a fun fall once we actually have football to talk about. That's not just preseason nonsense. That is just all fluff and whatever. But, y'all keep it tuned right here to 90.3 The Rock. You've been listening to Rock Solid Sports. The Funhouse is next right here on Volunteer Radio 90.3 The Rock. Rocking ears for 41 years.